Guy was telling his grandmother that the internet is such an incredible thing. You can ask any question and you'll get an answer. And the grandmother was a little skeptical. She said, "No, that can't be." He says, "I'm telling you, anything in the world that you want to know, you can ask on the computer and the computer will tell you." She says, "No, it's not possible." He says, "Give me a question. Ask a question, you'll see. There'll be an answer." She said, let me think for a minute. She says, yeah, here's my question. How is Aunt Zelda feeling? Stumped. There's a certain human dimension that a computer cannot answer because it's too impersonal. One of the things that happened as a result of this lockdown is that the things we thought were essential to our lives, in fact, that was what life was about. Shopping, entertainment, a nightclub, a sports event, travel. We thought that was life. 3 weeks ago, if somebody would have asked you, "So how's your life?" you would have said, "Very good. I traveled, I went, I saw, I visited." Now we're realizing that's not life. You can live without that. In fact, you're healthier without it. You're happier without it. Maybe a little bored, but happier. Where do you live? Where you're locked down. That's where you live. That's your life. Going to work, going for entertainment, going for travel, going for pleasure, that's commentary. That's not life. So the question that the computer can't answer is, how is your aunt? How's your grandmother? And in these couple of weeks, we have almost been forced to focus on those things. So when people say, "This is terrible, I miss my grandparents, I miss my grandchildren." Good. Finally. Finally, you're focusing on where your focus should be. So it's a good thing. And surprisingly, again, if you remember 3 weeks ago, people were saying, "What? Locked into the home with our kids 24 hours a day? I won't survive this." Not only are we surviving it, we're loving it. In fact, it's a little shocking. Everybody thought it was cute. "Oh, I can't be in the house with my kids all day long. My kids will go crazy. I'll go crazy. I can't even be in the same house with my spouse all day long. That would be crazy." Think about this for a minute. Your children and your spouse and your home were a threat to you. It was a dreadful thought to think of being with them 24 hours a day. There's something wrong with that picture. Hopefully, we'll never go back to that. Hopefully, we have been wizened up, we've been maturing, and we're never going to go back to that. Dread being with your children? Dread being with your spouse? What is it, too much of a good thing? It's not. Even religiously, people can't go to shul, people can't say Kaddish, people didn't go for Yisker. Pretty shocking. But who arranged this? Who made this condition? Ultimately, of course, God did it. God is telling us he doesn't want us in shul. I actually heard some speaker online. He was saying, do you see what God is telling us? He's had it with us. We're so bad, he doesn't even want us in shul anymore. Don't come to my house, stay in your house. Like parents sending their misbehaving child to his room. That's not what's happening. It's the exact opposite. God is saying, you have a home, you have a family, you have a life. Don't run away from that and come to shul or go to work or go out for entertainment. Live where you live. So there's this beautiful little example, or a guy said to God, God, you got to help me. I don't have a life. I got no life. Give me a life. You know, like I'm down to $20. God says, give me the $20 and I'll give you a life. The man says, okay, but if I give you my $20, I won't have money to buy gas for the car. God says, oh, you have a car? Give me the car and the $20 and I'll give you a life. The man says, okay, but if I don't have a car, how am I going to get to work? And God says, oh, you have a job? Give me your job and the car and the $20 and I'll give you a life. So the man says, all right, but if I give you my job, how am I going to support my family? How am I going to pay the mortgage? God says, oh, you have a house and a family? Okay, give me the family, give me the mortgage, the house, give me the car and give me the $20 and I'll give you a life. The man says, okay, it's all yours. So God says, good. Now I'm going to give you a marriage. I'm going to give you a house. I'm going to give you a job, and I'm going to give you $20 and a car. And now you have a life. So the guy who says, I don't have a life, you don't have a life? You're not living your life. You're looking for ways to escape. Live your life. That's what this quarantine is doing. It's making us live our lives. And it turns out that it's pretty enjoyable. People are pleasantly surprised. I like being home with my kids. And even more surprising, my kids like being home with me. And couples who were not getting along very well, all of a sudden, things are different. We have each other. It's the only thing we really have is each other. All of a sudden, we're looking good to each other. A lot of good things are coming from this. So that's number one. Number two, people are thinking, people are talking, how many victims, how many people died from this pandemic, from this plague? And we have to be really, really careful. It's like the plague has taken over and it's killing people. It makes it sound like those people shouldn't have died, but the plague, the plague. It's out of control. It's just killing people all over the place. Let me show you what the danger of it is. People die without a plague every day. But because of this plague, if you hear that somebody died, but not from corona, you say, oh, okay, so that's what? More acceptable? No death is acceptable. No death should be more acceptable than any other death. We're not against plagues, we're against dying. Like the guy said, I'm not afraid of flying. I don't have a fear of flying. Crashing scares me. I'm not afraid of a plague. I'm afraid of death, because death is wrong. Death shouldn't be for anybody, anywhere, ever. So there's the danger that we first of all attribute the death to the plague, and then anyone not dying from the plague is, dying for other reasons is not so interesting anymore. That's a terrible attitude. It is also very wrong and very not Jewish to think that a plague kills people. People die from many different causes. What the doctor writes on the death certificate, cause of death, really, what's the difference? Whether it was caused by a pandemic, or whether it's caused by a heart attack, or it's caused by pneumonia, what's the difference? Death is a terrible thing, regardless of what it says on the paper. So we should not be thinking that corona has the authority and the power to kill people. It doesn't. Unless a person is meant to pass away at exactly that time, at exactly that moment, then he wouldn't. And the proof of it is, we all know people who had the virus, got very close to losing their lives, and then all of a sudden they bounced back. Wasn't their time. So this we have to know absolutely without a shadow of a doubt. Nobody dies when it's not their time just because there's a pandemic going around. God runs the world, not viruses. So people die without the virus, people live with the virus. It all depends on what God has in store for us. So nobody is dying because of a plague. The death might come through the plague, but not because of the plague. Life is not that cheap that this tiny little microscopic bug can kill people. In fact, you know the difference between a virus and bacteria? There are bacterial infections and there are virus infections. Viruses are much harder to cure. Antibiotics is only good for bacteria, but it doesn't do anything for a virus. Why? Bacteria is a living cell. It comes both in good form and in negative form. There's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. Like there's good cholesterol and there's bad cholesterol. There is good bacteria because bacteria are alive. It's a living thing. Of course, if it gets out of hand, it can be dangerous. But a living thing can also be very good. Viruses are not alive. A virus is like um, it's a parasite that takes life from those things that are alive. It attacks your lung and draws life from it because it doesn't have a life of its own. It's a parasite. So basically, it's a lifeless entity. There's very little you can do with a lifeless thing. And what that means in terms of morality and psychologically, if you're alive with passion, not such healthy passion, not such kosher passion, that's a problem. But passion itself is a good thing. It's alive. If you can channel that passion into good things, you would be a very good person. Like the Berditchever Rebbe said to the sinner of Berditchev, he said, I envy you. When you do tshuva, when you rechannel all that energy, all that passion into doing mitzvahs, you will be the best among us because you will do it with such passion. So life can be very good, even if it can also be bad. But that which is lifeless is never good. It's never good. And that means a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of passion, a lack of devotion, a lack of ambition. That's not useful. You can't do anything with that. That's why it's so dangerous. So what is the antidote? How do you fight the lifeless? Obviously, by becoming more alive. A person who is fully alive, all the cylinders are firing, the parasite has no access. The parasite can't get close. The parasite has to find a vulnerable spot. What's a vulnerable spot? A spot that is not so alive. The person who is moral when he feels like it. He's nice to people when he's in the mood. But when he's not in the mood, see, that's a vulnerability. So the virus catches you when you're not in the mood, and that's when you're vulnerable. So the solution is not sometimes. Be fully alive at all times. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov taught us that sadness is not a sin. It's worse. Because when you're sad, you become vulnerable to every sin. Happiness is not a mitzvah. It's greater. Because when you're happy, when you're in a positive, optimistic, and enthusiastic mood, then you will do all the mitzvahs. So how do we respond to this pandemic? We find a greater enthusiasm for life. The worst thing is to kind of surrender to this, to become pessimistic. This thing is out of control. It's going to get us all. It's going to get a lot worse. This is just the tip of the iceberg. 100,000 people are going to die. 200,000 people. That is so unhelpful. That's literally giving in. Letting it intimidate you to where you're starting to accept the possibility of a loss of life. So you're already being drained of your life blood. That's what a parasite does. So if you start thinking negative, if you start thinking pessimistic, it's winning. It is succeeding. We don't allow it. No pessimism, no negative thinking, only optimistic. We're going to be fine. We're going to come out of this, and we're going to be even better. There is no compromising on life. When it comes to life, you have to be a fanatic. Only life, more life, better life, never life. So we have to be careful how we speak, especially around children. We don't want to give the impression that we're sitting ducks, we are helpless, this thing is going to take over, it's controlling. No. If you live fully, the virus can't get in. Another very interesting thing, one of the daily laws in the Code of Jewish Law, in the Shulchan Aruch, we are commanded that when we wake up in the morning, we have to wash our hands immediately and not touch the mouth or the eyes or the nose or the ears. In other words, the openings of the body, because we don't want the unholiness of the night of sleep to enter into the body. And that's exactly what doctors are telling us today. Wash your hands and keep them away from your face. And that's even when there's no pandemic, even when there is no known dangerous virus floating around. Just the little bit of toxicity that night brings or that sleep brings, you got to wash that away. And don't ever introduce it into your body. So you don't touch food before you wash your hands in the morning. You don't rub your eyes. In fact, you should never rub your eyes. Although we all have the habit of, you should use a handkerchief for that purpose. Rub your eyes with a handkerchief, not with your hand. Because the germs that your eye can handle are not as foul as the germs on your hands. The eye was not designed to handle the hands' germs. And the hands were not designed to handle the foot germs. So we have to wash our hands during the day. We have to wash our hands in a particular manner with a cup 3 times on each hand. And people would say, well, what's the difference? I don't have a cup. And why does it have to be 3 times? And does it have to be the whole hand? And we're thinking we're being a little too picky. But now we're seeing doctors saying, you got to wash your hands after touching a package, after touching a door handle, after touching a car. And you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds. It's beginning to sound like a religion. Oh, it has to be 20 seconds, huh? 15 is not enough? If you check it closely, you'll see 15 is not enough. So if you're a maven, if you really understand the subject, then these things are not petty. They're very real. One final thought. This virus is microscopically small. And yet look at the effect it can have on a person, on a community, on a country, on the whole globe. If a tiny, unhealthy thing can do so much damage, how much good can a tiny mitzvah do? a micro mitzvah, a microscopic kindness, not worth the effort? It is definitely worth the effort. Because if a microscopic virus can take a life, a microscopic kindness can give life, can save a life. So we are maturing rapidly in these weeks, both between ourselves and our family members and our fellow citizens and so on, and also between ourselves and God. We're starting to think clearly. What about those people who can't go to shul and say Kaddish? What about those people who died and nobody is saying Kaddish for them? Isn't that a tragedy on top of the tragedy? In Europe, people would say, teach your children Torah. Teach them, educate them, send them to a yeshiva. Because if you don't, then when you pass away, there'll be no one saying Kaddish for you. And that was like the most sobering, the most horrifying thought. No one saying Kaddish. Today, very, very good people have passed away and nobody is saying Kaddish because they can't get to the shul, they can't have a minyan. Yes, you can say Kaddish at home. It's not exactly the same. So why are these people who passed away, why are they being punished? On top of dying, they have to be punished by not having Yizkor said for them and not having Kaddish said for them? It's not like that. The way the Rebbe taught us to think with such positive and godly perspective, they're not being punished in that Kaddish is not said for them. Their death is so unusual and so special, they don't need Kaddish. They don't need it. They're going straight to heaven. They don't need you to clear the way and ease the way by saying Kaddish for them. In fact, before you can put together a minyan, they're already in heaven. So thank you very much, but they don't need Kaddish. That's how we should be thinking, because that sounds more like the truth. So I'll tell you a story. Rabbi Lau, Sr., the former chief rabbi of Israel, amazing, amazing person, went from a concentration camp as a child to the chief rabbi of Israel. It's worthwhile reading his book, his autobiography. At any rate, he was visiting with the Rebbe years ago. And of course, they spoke about the problems in Israel and the problems around the world. And finally, Rabbi Lau said, what's going to be? Was it sein? And the Rebbe said to him, rather than asking what's going to be, you should ask, what more can we do? Rabbi Lau repeats and quotes the Rebbe often. And when I heard it from him, I was thinking, why did the Rebbe say, rather than ask what's going to be? It's almost like, that's not a good question. Why is it not a good question? What's going to be? Seems like a pretty legitimate question. So first I thought, the Rebbe doesn't want to talk about what's going to be because it's depressing. Things are going to be really bad. Then I thought, no, that doesn't sound like the Rebbe. I can't imagine the Rebbe saying that. So the second thing that occurred to me was the Rebbe was a very practical person. What's going to be, we can't predict and we can't control. Better ask, what more can we do? Because that we can control. So the Rebbe is saying, rather than asking what's going to be, which we cannot control, so why shouldn't you ask it? Because it's idle talk. There's nothing you can do about it. It still didn't sound like the Rebbe. Very often when people tell you what the Rebbe said to them, it clicks immediately. Yep, that's the Rebbe. But this doesn't fit. This is not the Rebbe. Until finally, I came up with the third possibility. The third possibility is the Rebbe is saying, don't ask what's going to be, because we all know what's going to be. Mashiach is going to come. The world is going to become beautiful. Those who passed away are going to come back. We know what's going to be. We've known it for thousands of years. And we're very impatient for it to happen already. So what do you mean, what's going to be? What's going to be is great. But right now, before it gets that good, there's still something we should be doing. So let's find out what that is. Ask what more we can do. Not only because we can control. It's more like, if the future is good, and it is, if what's going to be is all positive, Mashiach is going to come, everything's going to be great, why do I need to do anything? So again, when the Rebbe says, rather than asking what's going to be, we should ask, what more can we do? Why should we ask that? If it's all going to be good, very good, then why do we have to do anything? Let's wait and have the good news. Now, to suggest that the reason we have to do good things before Mashiach is here is because if we misbehave carelessly, indifferently, that might delay Mashiach. So to say, I know Mashiach is coming, so I don't have to be good. I know Mashiach is coming, I don't have to be helpful. Mashiach will come, he'll fix everything. That's the exact opposite of what Mashiach is all about. Mashiach means we are making the world holier, and when it reaches a certain degree of holiness, then Mashiach can come and take us from there. But Mashiach cannot fix the world by himself. Mashiach comes to a world that is ready to be fixed. And how did it get to be ready? Because we served God properly. So, the Hasidic attitude is, we're not afraid of death. We're afraid of life. You don't have to have any wisdom to die. And once you're dead, you don't need any wisdom. Life is scary because for life, you need wisdom. So, we have to expect that the world is moving upwards to a much better place, to a much better condition. Beneath the surface, if you get past all the chaos and all the panic headlines designed to create panic, so that it sells more copies and so on. When we get past all of this, when those who need to heal have healed, and people stop getting the virus, the world is going to be a much better place. You have to believe that, because nothing else makes sense. Certainly God didn't create the world just to watch it blow itself up. So we have to be positive. Also, by being positive, we actually create the positivity. If you're thinking positive, if you're thinking happy thoughts, you're making the world a happier place for everybody on the planet. Because we now know things spread very quickly. Even unholy things, certainly holy things, because the positive is almost always stronger than the negative. So if the negative can be that powerful, then the positive must be even more powerful. It so happens, and of course not by coincidence, that this thing really hit us here in America around Purim time. And then it continued through Purim into Pesach. And now, after Pesach, it has begun to decline, certainly in New York City. Drastic drop in numbers of people coming to the hospital. Again, there are those who say this is punishment, we're not behaving, we don't take shul seriously enough, and that's why God doesn't want us in shul anymore. We're not kind enough, we're not honest enough, we cheat in business, we're not modest enough. That is so nasty, to blame the victim for his own pain, even if it were true that the person actually was playing, and even so, where's the compassion? Even if a person did misbehave and got himself into trouble, we argue with God that the person does not deserve to be punished. Like Avraham did when God said, I'm going to destroy Sodom. Avraham argued. Why else is God telling you? He needs your approval? He wants you to argue. He wants you to present a case in favor of the wicked. Find something redeeming, something good about them that earns them the right to continue living rather than getting punished. That's the Jewish way. So the thought that this might be a punishment, that God is unhappy with us, that's completely ridiculous. For a very simple reason, just common sense. It's been 3,000 years since God spoke to us at Mount Sinai. 3,332 years to be exact. That's a long time. What happened when God did speak to us at Mount Sinai? He asked us to become His, like a wedding. And of course, we agreed. After that, God gave us 2,000 years of uninterrupted misery. An unbelievable history of unbelievable suffering. So 3,000 years he doesn't speak to us. 2,000 years of those 3,000 have miserable, painful, frightening, horrifying. Is it possible that God is now going to be angry with us because we're not perfect in the performance of mitzvahs? If you believe that God is capable of reacting to your sins, then you must also believe that God is capable of changing his mind. So there are times when punishment applies, when the Torah says or God says, if you do this, this will be your punishment. There are times when that actually applies, but there must also be times when it doesn't apply. Because before you punish someone, you have to take the circumstances into account. Extenuating circumstances means you don't get punished. So I don't think Jews have done anything terrible to deserve punishment. And even if they did it, we have to argue in their favor that despite their sin, they don't deserve that kind of punishment. That's our job. When we see someone is hungry, it's our job to feed him. Oh, why don't you complain to the boss who created it all? So how could God possibly be angry at us? How can God have any complaints to us after 3,000 years of not hearing from him, 2,000 years of absolute misery? So yeah, we're not like our grandparents. We're not as devoted, we're not as holy, we're not as steeped. But how can you expect us to be? So God can't possibly be angry at us in the first place. And then punish? God forbid. That's suggesting that God is a monster. I made them promise to be good Jews 3,000 years ago. I'm not talking to them again. They're going to have to make it on their own. And I'm going to put them through living hell for 2,000 years. And then if they're not keeping their promise, I'm going to be really angry and I'm going to have to punish them. It sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. God is not angry. God is absolutely, pleasantly surprised by how loyal Jews are, how devoted we remain, despite all of the above. So no, we don't deserve punishment. What we deserve is a lot of reward. And part of the reason we deserve a lot of reward is because we're not asking for it. We don't serve God, we don't put on tefillin, we don't light Shabbos candles in order to get to heaven. So we should take all of this as a big compliment. God is pleased with his people. How can he not be? And we should reciprocate. Prove God right. He doesn't have to speak to us every month at Mount Sinai for a progress report or quality control. He doesn't have to. He gave us the Torah. We heard it. We got it. We're doing it. Not perfectly. You expect perfection after 2,000 years of misery? No. On the contrary, anyone who does a mitzvah today, any parent who tells their children, we are Jews, is already a hero. What where is this devotion coming from? After all this time and after all this suffering? It's important to you that your children should know that they're Jews? Why not give it up already? Let it go. Hasn't been a picnic. And we're not letting it go. We're not. There's something very, very impressive about that. So not only don't we deserve punishment, we actually deserve all the rewards in the world, because despite everything, we are as loyal today to God as our ancestors were in the generation that came out of Egypt. But let's take a look at both Purim and Pesach, because this thing started in earnest around Purim time, and it's already starting to fade in Pesach time. That's why I'm so sure that this is a positive thing, because anything that begins in the month of Adar is always to our favor. So, what is the story of Purim? Mordechai knows of Haman's plot. Somebody's got to tell the king and convince him to stop it. Who can do this? The queen, Esther, the love of his life. But Esther can't come to the palace anytime she wants. So she messages Mordechai saying, you're asking me to go to the king, I could get killed. So you would expect that Mordechai would lay it on thick. You must save the Jewish people. We're all going to die. All of us. It's going to be... In fact, Mordechai says the exact opposite. Mordechai says, I'm not worried about the Jewish people. The Jewish people are forever, regardless of who the king is, or the dictator, or the style of government. Our existence, our survival, our lives come from God. So we're going to be okay. And yet he wants Esther to risk her life by going to the king. Why would he do that? Why not make it sound like she's got to go because the entire Jewish population of 127 countries is at stake? And Mordechai says, no, it's not. Nothing can threaten the survival and the existence of the Jewish people. We're here for keeps. Well, in that case, I don't have to do anything, right? No. The Rebbe, who said, don't ask what's going to be, because what's going to be is all positive. He didn't always speak this way. There were times when he had to really struggle and argue with God and keep the bad news from happening. But most of the time, the Rebbe's answer to negativity was positivity. If a man comes in off the street crying, brokenhearted, what do? You sing a lively song. You get him to dance with you. So Mordechai says to Esther, don't get illusions of grandeur. You're not going to save Klal Yisrael. the entire Jewish population of the world. No, 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 no. What you're going to do is you're going to fulfill the reason for which you became queen in the first place about 10 years ago. It was 10 years that Sarah was stuck in the palace. And for that, to fulfill your little destiny, the reason for which your soul came down to heaven, the reason that you became the queen in the first place, to fulfill the purpose for that, it's valuable enough to risk your life. So don't risk your life for the Jewish people. The Jewish people's lives are stronger than yours. But risk your life to fulfill the purpose for which your soul came down, because you can't do it on your own. You got to go out. The purpose of your being queen is for this moment when you can speak to him and influence him. So this is what Purim is telling us. God doesn't need us to do heroic good deeds. Gather together in a big minyan and say all the prayers that only a minyan can say. God is saying, keep it simple. Stay at home. Talk to me from your home, without the synagogue, without the rabbi. Because it's you that's important, not the big tumults. It's not so much the public mitzvah as the personal mitzvah. Because in the end, God wants you. He asks you to do mitzvahs because the mitzvah will bring you closer to him, and he wants you.